The morning bell echoed through Jefferson Elementary, and students filed into Mrs. Rachel Morrison's fifth-grade classroom with the usual chaos of backpacks, chatter, and shuffling feet. Sunlight streamed through the tall windows, casting long shadows across the rows of desks. Children claimed their seats, pulling out notebooks and pencils, settling into the familiar rhythm of another school day. Rachel stood at the front of the room, her coffee mug still warm in her hand, mentally reviewing the day's lesson plans. She had been teaching for 12 years, and mornings like this had become second nature, predictable, manageable, comforting in their routine. But then she noticed something unusual. While 23 students had taken their seats, one remained standing beside her desk near the back corner of the room. Emma Chen. A petite girl with dark hair pulled into a neat ponytail stood perfectly still, her hands clasped in front of her, eyes fixed on the floor. Rachel's first instinct was to give the child a moment. Perhaps Emma had forgotten something, or maybe she was feeling shy today. Children went through phases, after all. Rachel began taking attendance, calling out names in alphabetical order. Michael Adams? Here. Sarah Bennett? Here. When she reached Emma's name, the girl responded with a quiet, here, but still didn't sit down. Several students glanced back at her, whispering to each other. Rachel set down her attendance sheet and walked down the aisle toward Emma's desk, her footsteps soft against the linoleum floor. Emma, sweetheart, Rachel said gently, keeping her voice low so as not to embarrass the girl in front of her classmates. Is everything okay? You need to take your seat now so we can start our lesson. Emma looked up briefly, her dark eyes meeting Rachel's for just a second before darting away. Her lips barely moved when she spoke, her voice so quiet that Rachel had to lean closer to hear. I can't. The words hung in the air between them. Rachel felt a small flutter of concern, but she maintained her calm exterior. You can't sit down. Why not, honey? Emma's response was to look down at her shoes again, her small frame rigid with tension. She didn't offer any explanation, didn't move toward her chair, didn't say another word. Rachel waited, giving the girl space to elaborate, but only silence followed. The other students were watching now, their curiosity piqued by the unusual interaction. Rachel could feel the lesson slipping away from her, the morning routine disrupted by this strange standoff. Before we dive in, drop a comment and let us know where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. If you enjoy educational stories like this, be sure to like the video, subscribe, turn on the notification bell, and share it with someone who'd love it too. Rachel made a decision. She wouldn't force the issue. Not yet. Sometimes children needed a moment to adjust, to feel safe enough to explain what was troubling them. Pushing too hard could make things worse. All right, she said softly, placing a hand briefly on Emma's shoulder. The girl flinched slightly at the touch, and Rachel withdrew her hand immediately. You can stand for now, but we'll talk about this later, okay? Emma nodded, still not meeting her teacher's eyes. Rachel returned to the front of the classroom, her mind already spinning with possible explanations. Maybe Emma had hurt herself and sitting was uncomfortable. Maybe she was being stubborn about something. Maybe this was some kind of anxiety response. Rachel had seen plenty of unusual behaviors in her years of teaching, but something about Emma's demeanor struck her as different. There was fear in the girl's posture, a kind of frozen quality that didn't quite fit with typical childhood defiance or attention-seeking. The morning continued, and Emma remained standing. Rachel taught her math lesson, guided the class through a reading comprehension exercise, and supervised a group project, all while keeping one eye on the girl in the back corner. Emma participated when called upon, her answers correct and delivered in that same quiet voice. She wrote in her notebook, raised her hand occasionally, behaved in every way like a model student except for one glaring abnormality. She would not sit down. By lunchtime, Rachel's concern had deepened. She watched Emma walk to the cafeteria with the other students, her movements stiff and careful, as though every step required concentration. When the children returned from lunch, Emma took her position beside her desk again, standing in the exact same spot she had occupied all morning. Other teachers noticed and asked Rachel about it in passing. "What's going on with the Chen girl?" someone asked in the hallway. "Is she being punished?" "No," Rachel replied, shaking her head. "I don't know what's going on yet." The second day brought no change. Emma arrived at school in a clean uniform, her backpack properly packed, her homework completed and turned in on time. But when the morning bell rang and students settled into their seats, Emma stood beside her desk once more. Rachel approached her again, this time with a bit more firmness in her voice. "Emma, we need to talk about this. You've been standing for 2 days now. Can you tell me what's wrong?" Emma's fingers twisted together, her knuckles turning white from the pressure. She kept her gaze fixed on a spot on the floor, her jaw clenched tight. I can't sit down, Mrs. Morrison. Please don't make me." The plea in those last words made Rachel's chest tighten. This wasn't defiance. This was desperation. "Honey, are you hurt? Did something happen?" "No," Emma whispered, but the lie was transparent. Everything about her body language screamed that something was very, very wrong. Rachel decided to take a different approach. "All right. You don't have to sit if you're not ready. But I want you to know that if you need help, if something is bothering you, you can always tell me. I'm here to help you, Emma. That's my job." Emma's eyes glistened with unshed tears, but she nodded quickly and looked away. Rachel returned to teaching, but her mind was no longer fully on the lesson. She watched Emma throughout the day, noting every small detail. The way the girl shifted her weight from foot to foot. The way she moved with careful, measured steps when walking to sharpen her pencil. The way she tensed whenever someone walked past her desk too quickly. By the end of the second day, Rachel knew she needed to involve others. During her planning period, she walked to the main office and requested a meeting with the school counselor and the principal. They gathered in Principal Henderson's office, a cramped space lined with filing cabinets and motivational posters. Rachel explained the situation, describing Emma's behavior and her own failed attempts to understand what was happening. "Has she been acting out in other ways?" Principal Henderson asked, leaning back in his chair. He was a practical man, more administrator than educator, always looking for the simplest explanation. "No," Rachel said. "She's quiet, well-behaved, gets good grades. This is completely out of character for her." The school counselor, Mrs. Patterson, tapped her pen against her notepad. "It could be anxiety. Some children develop school refusal behaviors or specific phobias. Perhaps she had a negative experience with sitting, or maybe this is a control issue at home, manifesting at school. Or maybe she's just testing boundaries," Principal Henderson suggested. "Sometimes kids do strange things for attention, especially if they're not getting enough of it at home." Rachel felt frustration rising in her throat. These explanations felt too simple, too dismissive of what she was observing. "I really think it's more than that. Something about this feels wrong. I think we should call her parents in for a conference." "Let's give it a few more days," Principal Henderson decided. "Monitor the situation. If it continues, we'll bring in the parents, but I don't want to alarm them unnecessarily over what might just be a phase." Rachel left the meeting unsatisfied but bound by the decision. She returned to her classroom and began preparing for the next day, her thoughts circling back to Emma again and again. That night she lay in bed, unable to sleep, replaying every interaction with the girl, searching for clues she might have missed. The third day began with the same pattern. Emma stood beside her desk, her face pale and drawn. But today, Rachel noticed something new. When Emma reached into her backpack to retrieve her homework, she moved with extreme care, as though her entire body was fragile. The motion of bending even slightly made her catch her breath, a tiny gasp that Rachel heard from across the room. During morning recess, Rachel stood by the window watching the children play. Most of them ran and shouted, chasing each other around the playground equipment, burning off energy in the crisp autumn air. But Emma sat alone on a bench at the far edge of the playground, her posture rigid, her hands folded in her lap. She didn't attempt to join the games. She didn't even seem to watch them. She simply sat there, isolated and still, like a statue among the chaos. Rachel's teaching assistant, a young woman named Jennifer who was working toward her education degree, appeared beside her. "That's the third day now," Jennifer observed, nodding toward Emma through the window. "The other kids are starting to ask questions. Some of them think she's in trouble. Others think she's weird." "I know," Rachel said quietly. "I don't know how to help her if she won't tell me what's wrong." "Have you considered that maybe someone told her not to tell?" Jennifer suggested carefully. "Like, what if something is happening at home and she's been threatened into silence?" The thought had crossed Rachel's mind, but hearing someone else voice it made it real in a way that frightened her. "If that's true, I need proof before I can do anything. I can't just accuse parents based on a feeling." "But you can document concerns," Jennifer pressed. "You can create a record of unusual behavior. If something is wrong, that documentation might be important later." Rachel nodded slowly. Jennifer was right. She pulled out her phone and opened a notes app, beginning to type a detailed log of everything she had observed over the past 3 days. The refusal to sit, the careful movements, the flinching, the isolation. Each detail felt small on its own, but together they formed a pattern that made Rachel's stomach churn with worry. The fourth day brought a subtle escalation. During silent reading time, Rachel circulated around the classroom, checking on students' progress. When she approached Emma's desk, she noticed the girls' hands trembling as they held her book. The tremor was slight but constant, as though Emma was fighting to keep her body under control. Rachel knelt beside the desk, bringing herself to Emma's eye level. "Emma," she said softly, "your hands are shaking. Are you feeling okay? Are you cold?" Emma pulled her hands away, tucking them under her arms. "I'm fine." "You don't look fine, sweetheart. When was the last time you ate something?" "I had breakfast," Emma replied, but her voice lacked conviction. Rachel made a mental note to check whether Emma was eating lunch. Neglect often showed up in subtle ways: missed meals, unwashed clothes, exhaustion. But Emma's uniform was always clean, her hair always neatly brushed. Whatever was happening wasn't presenting in the typical ways Rachel had been trained to recognize. That afternoon, during a lesson on fractions, Emma suddenly swayed on her feet. Several students gasped, and Rachel rushed to her side just as the girl steadied herself against her desk. "Emma, are you dizzy? Do you need to go to the nurse?" "No," Emma said quickly, too quickly. "I'm okay. I just stood up too fast." "You've been standing all day, honey. You couldn't have stood up too fast." Emma didn't respond to that logic. She simply straightened herself, gripping the edge of her desk until her knuckles turned white, and fixed her eyes forward as though willing herself to disappear. Rachel felt helpless, watching this child suffer in silence while she fumbled around in the dark, trying to understand what was happening. After school, Rachel made copies of her documentation and walked them to Principal Henderson's office. She placed the papers on his desk and waited while he read through them. When he looked up, his expression was troubled but still cautious. "This is concerning," he admitted, "but it's still not clear what we're dealing with. Has she said anything at all about what's bothering her?" "No, she won't talk about it." "Then our hands are tied, Rachel. We can't intervene in a family's life without cause. Keep documenting. Keep trying to build trust with her. But unless she tells you something concrete, or unless you see evidence of abuse, we have to wait." Rachel wanted to scream at the bureaucracy of it all. at the rules that protected systems more than children. But she knew arguing would accomplish nothing. She returned to her classroom and sat at her desk as the autumn sun set outside her windows, casting long shadows across the empty room. She thought about Emma standing beside her desk day after day, trapped in whatever nightmare she was living, unable to ask for help. The fifth day changed everything. Rachel arrived at school early, as she always did, and was preparing materials for the day's science lesson when the school nurse, Mrs. Chen, no relation to Emma despite the shared surname, knocked on her door. "Rachel, do you have a minute?" "Of course. Come in." Mrs. Chen closed the door behind her and spoke in a low voice. "I wanted to let you know that Emma came to my office yesterday afternoon, after school. She said she felt sick." "Did you examine her?" "I tried to. She wouldn't let me touch her. She said her stomach hurt. But when I asked if I could check for fever or look at where it hurt, she became very upset, almost panicked. She left before I could really assess anything." Rachel's heart sank. She's been refusing to sit down all week. "Did you notice anything else about her? How she moved, how she acted?" Mrs. Chen nodded slowly. "She walked like someone in pain, stiff, careful, and she seemed afraid, Rachel. Not sick afraid, afraid. The two women looked at each other, and in that moment, they both understood that something was deeply wrong. "What do we do?" Rachel asked. "I've documented my observations in her health file," Mrs. Chen said, "and I think you should try to talk to her again today. Really talk to her. Sometimes children just need one person to ask the right question in the right way." When students arrived that morning, Rachel watched Emma walk into the classroom with the same careful gait, the same guarded expression. The girl took her position beside her desk and stood there while the morning routine unfolded around her. During math, Rachel noticed Emma wincing when she bent to pick up a dropped pencil. During language arts, Emma's eyes seemed unfocused, as though she was somewhere else entirely, retreating into her mind to escape her body. At lunch, Rachel didn't go to the teacher's lounge. Instead, she walked to the cafeteria and observed from a distance. Emma sat alone at a table, her lunch tray untouched in front of her. She pushed food around with her fork, but didn't eat. After 10 minutes, she stood carefully and dumped the entire meal into the trash. Rachel felt her throat tighten. The girl was starving herself or couldn't eat because of pain, or both. When the students returned from lunch, Rachel made a decision. She pulled Emma aside in the hallway while the other children filed into the classroom. "Emma, I need you to stay after school today, just for a few minutes. I want to talk to you, just the two of us. Is that okay?" Emma's eyes widened with fear. "Am I in trouble?" "No, honey, you're not in trouble at all. I just want to make sure you're okay. Can you do that for me?" Emma hesitated, then nodded. The rest of the afternoon dragged by with agonizing slowness. Rachel taught her lessons on autopilot, her mind already on the conversation she would have with Emma, the questions she would ask, the safe space she needed to create for this child to finally tell the truth. When the final bell rang and students packed their bags, Emma remained standing beside her desk. The other children filtered out, calling goodbyes, laughing about after-school plans. Jennifer, the teaching assistant, gave Rachel a knowing look and quietly left the room, closing the door behind her. The classroom fell silent except for the ticking of the wall clock. Rachel pulled a chair over and sat down in front of Emma, deliberately positioning herself lower than the girl so Emma wouldn't feel intimidated. "Thank you for staying," Rachel began gently. "I've been worried about you this week. Will you tell me what's going on?" Emma stared at the floor, her jaw working as though she was chewing on words she couldn't quite spit out. "I told you. I can't sit down. I understand that, but I need to understand why. Did you hurt yourself? Did someone hurt you?" The question hung in the air like smoke. Emma's breathing became shallow, rapid. her hands clenched into fists at her sides. "No one hurt me," she whispered, but tears were streaming down her cheeks now, belying her words. Rachel leaned forward slightly. "Emma, I'm going to say something, and I need you to really hear me. Whatever is happening, whatever you're afraid of, it's not your fault. Do you understand? Nothing that has happened to you is your fault, and I am here to help you, but I can't help if I don't know what's wrong." Emma's whole body began to shake. She wrapped her arms around herself, hunching forward as though trying to make herself smaller, to disappear into the floor. "You don't understand," she choked out between sobs. "I promised I wouldn't tell. I promised." Rachel's heart shattered at the sound of that broken promise, at the loyalty this child felt toward whoever had hurt her. "Who did you promise, Emma? Who made you promise not to tell?" But Emma was shaking her head violently now, backing away from Rachel toward the corner of the room. I can't say. Please don't make me say." Rachel stood slowly, keeping her movements calm and non-threatening. "Okay. You don't have to say anything right now. But Emma, I need to make sure you're safe. I need to see if you're hurt. Will you let me do that? I promise I'll be very gentle." Emma pressed herself into the corner, her eyes wild with terror. For a moment, Rachel thought the girl might bolt from the room entirely. But then something shifted in Emma's expression, a kind of exhausted resignation, as though she was too tired to keep running, too tired to keep the secret any longer. "It hurts," she whispered. "Everything hurts." "I know, sweetheart. I know. Let me help you." Emma nodded slowly, and Rachel approached with the same caution she might use with a wounded animal. She knelt beside the girl and spoke softly. "I'm going to look at your back, okay? I just need to lift your shirt a little bit. You can tell me to stop at any time." Emma's entire body was trembling as Rachel carefully reached for the hem of the girl's uniform shirt. She lifted it slowly, revealing pale skin, and Rachel's breath caught in her throat. Long, dark bruises striped across Emma's lower back, some fresh and purple, others yellowing with age. There were marks that looked like welts, angry red lines crisscrossing her skin. Rachel's hands began to shake as she lifted the shirt higher and saw more bruises, more marks, evidence of repeated, systematic abuse. "Oh my God," Rachel breathed. "Emma, who did this to you?" But Emma was sobbing now, her thin shoulders heaving with the weight of everything she had been carrying. Rachel gently lowered the girl's shirt and pulled her into an embrace, careful not to touch the injured areas. Emma collapsed against her, months or maybe years of pain and fear pouring out in great, racking sobs. Rachel held her and cried too, tears streaming down her face as the full horror of what this child had endured crashed over her. "You're safe now," Rachel whispered into Emma's hair. "I've got you. You're safe." When Emma's sobs finally subsided into hiccups and sniffles, Rachel pulled back and looked into the girl's swollen, red-rimmed eyes. "Emma, I need to call some people who are going to help us. People who are going to make sure whoever did this can't hurt you anymore. Do you understand?" Emma nodded, exhausted and defeated. "My stepdad," she whispered. "He gets mad. He says I'm bad. He says if I tell anyone, he'll hurt my mom too." Rachel felt rage surge through her, hot and righteous, but she kept her voice calm for Emma's sake. "He lied to you, honey. Telling the truth isn't going to hurt your mom. It's going to protect both of you. I promise you that." Rachel guided Emma to sit in the teacher's chair, the only soft chair in the room, and was careful to get her a cushion first. Then she stepped into the hallway and made 3 phone calls. First, to Principal Henderson, her voice shaking as she explained what she had discovered. Second, to 911, reporting suspected child abuse and requesting immediate assistance. Third, to the school nurse, asking her to come to the classroom right away. Within minutes, the room filled with adults. Principal Henderson arrived looking grave and shaken. Mrs. Chen came with her medical kit. 2 police officers followed shortly after, their radios crackling with static. Through it all, Rachel stayed by Emma's side, holding the girl's hand, whispering reassurances. The paramedics arrived next, and Rachel watched as they gently examined Emma, documenting every injury with photographs and careful notes. The girl winced and whimpered but allowed them to work. Her trust finally extended to these strangers who had come to help. Rachel answered questions from the police officers, providing her documentation of the past week, describing everything she had observed. "You did the right thing calling us," one officer told her. "These injuries are severe. This has been going on for a long time." Rachel felt sick. How long had Emma suffered in silence? How many mornings had she come to school carrying this burden, hiding it beneath her clean uniform and polite demeanor? "What happens now?" Rachel asked. "We're taking her to the hospital for a full examination," the officer explained. "Child Protective Services has been notified. They'll meet us there. We'll be picking up the stepfather for questioning within the hour." Emma was placed on a stretcher, a thin blanket tucked around her small frame. As the paramedics prepared to wheel her out, Emma reached for Rachel's hand. "Will you come with me?" she asked, her voice small and frightened. Rachel looked at Principal Henderson, who nodded. "Go. I'll handle things here." Rachel rode in the ambulance, holding Emma's hand the entire way. The sirens wailed around them as they sped through traffic, but inside the vehicle, Rachel spoke quietly to Emma, telling her about all the people who were going to help her now, about the safe place she would stay, about how brave she was for finally telling the truth. Emma listened with half-closed eyes, exhausted from the adrenaline crash, from the weight of secrets finally lifted. At the hospital, doctors and nurses swarmed around Emma's bed, conducting examinations, ordering tests, treating her injuries with gentle hands and kind words. A social worker named Maria arrived and introduced herself to Emma, explaining in simple terms what would happen next. Emma would not be going home with her stepfather. She would not be going home at all, not until it was safe. Her mother would be contacted and offered resources and support. The stepfather would face legal consequences for what he had done. Rachel stayed for hours, sitting in a plastic chair beside Emma's hospital bed, watching the girl drift in and out of sleep. The bruises looked worse under the harsh hospital lights, evidence of cruelty that made Rachel's stomach turn. How many other children were sitting in classrooms right now, hiding similar secrets? How many teachers were missing the signs, or worse, seeing them but failing to act? When Maria returned with updates, her expression was grim. "We've been in contact with Emma's mother. She claims she didn't know the extent of the abuse, but there's evidence she may have been aware and failed to protect Emma. We're investigating that separately. For now, Emma will be placed in emergency foster care with a trained therapeutic family." "Can I visit her?" Rachel asked. "Once she's settled, yes. The foster family understands how important supportive relationships are for children in trauma. Your advocacy made a huge difference, Mrs. Morrison. You saved this child's life." Rachel didn't feel like a hero. She felt like she had failed by not seeing sooner, by accepting Emma's silence for too long. But when Emma woke briefly and smiled at her, a real, genuine smile, the first Rachel had seen from her, some of the guilt eased. This child was safe now. That was what mattered. Late that night, Rachel finally left the hospital and drove home through empty streets. She sat in her car in her driveway for a long time before going inside, replaying everything that had happened, everything she had seen. Tomorrow she would return to school and face a classroom with an empty desk. Tomorrow she would have to explain to curious students that Emma was getting help and wouldn't be back for a while. Tomorrow she would begin the process of healing from secondary trauma, of processing what she had witnessed. But tonight she allowed herself to cry. For Emma, for all the children suffering in silence, for the brokenness of a world where adults could hurt the vulnerable so easily. She cried until she was empty, and then she went inside and tried to sleep. The next morning, Rachel arrived at school before sunrise, seeking the comfort of routine. She set up her classroom for the day, but her eyes kept drifting to Emma's empty desk. The police had assured her that Emma's stepfather was in custody, that he would be formally charged with multiple counts of child abuse and assault. Emma's mother was being investigated for failure to protect. The legal system was grinding into motion, slow but thorough, building a case that would ensure Emma never had to return to that house of horrors. When students began arriving, they immediately noticed Emma's absence. "Where's Emma?" Michael asked. "Is she sick?" Rachel had prepared for this question, had discussed with Principal Henderson the appropriate way to address it. "Emma is taking some time away from school to deal with some personal matters. She's safe and being taken care of. And that's all I can tell you right now. I know you all care about her, and when she's ready, I'm sure she'd appreciate knowing her classmates were thinking of her." The children accepted this explanation with the adaptability of youth, moving on to other topics within minutes. But Jennifer, the teaching assistant, lingered after the students settled into their work. "How is she really?" she asked quietly. "Physically, she'll heal," Rachel said. "Emotionally, that's going to take a long time, but she's in good hands now." Over the following days, Rachel threw herself into her work with renewed intensity. She found herself watching her students more carefully, looking for the subtle signs she had learned to recognize. A child who flinched at sudden movements. A student who wore long sleeves in warm weather. Anyone who seemed withdrawn or changed their behavior suddenly. She began documenting more carefully, building relationships with her students that went beyond academics, creating a classroom culture where children knew they could come to her with problems. The school district arranged for a therapist to come speak with Rachel about secondary trauma. In that session, Rachel broke down, admitting her guilt over not seeing Emma's abuse sooner. The therapist was gentle but firm. "You couldn't have known what you didn't know. What matters is that when you saw the signs, you acted. You didn't look away. You didn't make excuses. You did exactly what you should have done." "But I waited almost a week," Rachel protested. "She suffered for days while I tried to figure out what was wrong." "You built trust," the therapist corrected. "You created a safe space for her to eventually disclose. If you had pushed too hard too fast, she might have retreated further into silence. You handled it exactly right, Rachel. The guilt you're feeling is natural, but it's not productive. Channel it into awareness and action." Those words stayed with Rachel. She attended workshops on recognizing child abuse. She volunteered to serve on her school's crisis response team. She became a mandatory reporter trainer, teaching other teachers how to spot the signs she had missed for too long. Emma's case had awakened something in her, a fierce protectiveness, a determination to never let another child slip through the cracks if she could help it. 3 weeks after Emma's hospitalization, Rachel received a call from Maria, the social worker. "Emma has been asking about you. She's settling into her foster placement, but she'd like to see you if you're willing to visit." Rachel agreed immediately, and that Saturday she drove to the address Maria provided, a modest home in a quiet neighborhood. The foster mother, a warm woman named Patricia, greeted Rachel at the door. "Emma talks about you constantly," Patricia said. "You made a real difference in her life." Emma appeared in the hallway, looking healthier than Rachel had ever seen her. She had gained a little weight, her skin had color in it, and most importantly, her eyes held a light that had been absent before. "Mrs. Morrison!" Emma rushed forward and hugged Rachel tightly. Rachel hugged her back, tears streaming down her face. "Hi, sweetheart. It's so good to see you." They sat in Patricia's living room and Emma talked excitedly about her new school. about the therapy dog that visited her sessions, about the art projects she was doing to express feelings she still struggled to verbalize. She was healing, slowly but surely, rebuilding herself from the foundation up. Rachel listened and encouraged, marveling at the resilience of this child who had survived so much. Before Rachel left, Emma asked, "When can I come back to your class?" Rachel's heart broke a little. "Oh, honey, you're at a new school now, closer to where you live. But that doesn't mean we can't still see each other. I'd love to visit you again, if that's okay with you and Patricia." Emma nodded enthusiastically. "I'd like that. I want to show you all my artwork." As Rachel drove home that day, she felt something shift inside her. The guilt was still there, but it was joined by something stronger. Hope. Emma was going to be okay. It would take time and there would be setbacks, but this child had been given a second chance at life. That was worth everything. Months passed. Rachel continued teaching, continued watching over her students with vigilance tempered by warmth. She visited Emma regularly, watching the girl blossom in the safety of her foster home. Emma's biological mother completed a treatment program and supervised visits began, though the relationship remained complicated. Emma's stepfather was convicted and sentenced to 12 years in prison. Justice, imperfect as it was, had been served. One afternoon in early spring, Rachel received a package in the mail. Inside was a drawing Emma had made, a picture of a classroom with a teacher standing beside a desk and a small girl sitting in a chair, both of them smiling. At the bottom, in Emma's careful handwriting, were the words, "Thank you for saving me. Love, Emma." Rachel framed that drawing and hung it in her classroom where she could see it every day. It became a reminder of why she taught, why she cared, why she paid attention to the quiet children in the back of the room. Because sometimes the loudest cries for help were silent. Sometimes the bravest thing a child could do was stand when everyone else sat. And sometimes a teacher's most important lesson had nothing to do with math or reading, but everything to do with seeing a child, really seeing them, and refusing to look away. The school year ended, and a new one began. Rachel's classroom filled with new faces, new personalities, new challenges. But she carried Emma's story with her, carried it like armor and like warning. She trained her eyes to see beyond the surface, to notice the small signs that something might be wrong. She created a classroom culture where every child knew they were valued, where safety was paramount, where trust could be built one small interaction at a time. Years later, Rachel would receive a letter from Emma, now a teenager thriving in high school. The letter described Emma's dreams of becoming a social worker herself, of helping other children the way she had been helped. "You changed my life," Emma wrote. "You saw me when I was invisible. You heard me when I couldn't speak. You taught me that asking for help isn't weakness, it's courage. Thank you for everything." Rachel read that letter and cried, but they were tears of joy this time. Emma's story hadn't ended in that classroom 5 years ago. It had begun there. And the ripples of that moment, of a teacher who noticed, who cared, who acted, would continue spreading outward for the rest of Emma's life and beyond, touching every child Emma would eventually help in her own career. The moral of the story wasn't complicated. It was as simple and as profound as attention. Watch the children in your care. Notice when something changes. Create spaces safe enough for truth-telling. Believe children when they show you, even wordlessly, that something is wrong. Act on your instincts even when you're uncertain, even when it's inconvenient, even when you're afraid of being wrong. Because somewhere, right now, there's a child standing when they should be sitting. There's a child wearing long sleeves in summer. There's a child who's too quiet, too perfect, too afraid. There's a child who needs one person, just one, to notice, to care, to ask the right question, to refuse to look away. Be that person. It might save a life. If this story moved you, take a moment to reflect on the children in your community. Are there signs you might be missing? Are there conversations you need to have? Share this video with someone who works with children, teachers, coaches, counselors, parents. Let's create a world where every child has at least one adult who sees them, really sees them, and acts to protect them. Drop a comment below sharing your thoughts or your own experiences with recognizing when someone needs help. Your story might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. And if you haven't already, subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you never miss stories that matter. Like this video to help us reach more people who need to hear this message. Thank you for watching, and thank you for caring enough to make it to the end. Together we can make a difference, one noticed child at a time.